let me ask you something right now. What if in just 7 words, 7 moves, and 7 days you could completely change the way an avoidant attaches to you? Think about that for a moment. What if the same person who once ran from you started leaning in? What if the very walls that kept you out became the doors that let you in? You see, most people get stuck in a cycle with avoidance, chasing, begging, over-explaining, doubting their worth. And every time you do that, you push them further away. But here's the truth: avoidants don't pull back because you're not enough. They pull back because they fear being consumed, controlled, or losing themselves. So if you want to flip that attachment, you don't fight their fear. You flip the frame. You shift the energy. You show them that connection doesn't mean control. That love doesn't mean losing freedom. That intimacy doesn't equal suffocation. And here's how we do it: 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. When you're caught in the cycle with an avoidant, the first instinct is to explain yourself. You explain why you reacted the way you did, why you want what you want, why you're worthy of their love, why they shouldn't leave, why they should choose you. And every time you explain, you think you're building clarity, but in reality, you're draining power. Because here's the hard truth: words rarely convince an avoidant. They don't feel safety in explanations. They feel safety in energy. They don't lean in because you told them 10 different reasons to stay. They lean in because they felt your strength, your independence, your unshakable identity. Think about it: when has over-explaining ever made someone value you more? It doesn't. It does the opposite. The more you explain, the more they hear desperation in your voice. The more you justify, the more they sense imbalance. The avoidant doesn't run from you because of who you are. They run from the energy of pressure. And pressure comes in the form of constant reasoning, persuading, and proving. So the move here is radical. You stop explaining, you stop convincing, you stop chasing with words. Instead, you start living in a way that speaks louder than anything your mouth could ever say. When you're out building your body, growing your career, laughing with friends, traveling, creating, stepping into experiences that light you up, you are sending a message more powerful than 1,000 explanations: I am whole, with or without you. That message shakes the avoidant's inner world, because suddenly you're not the pursuer. You're the flame they can't ignore. Living instead of explaining doesn't mean you cut off communication or play cold games. It means your actions carry more weight than your arguments. It means when they question you, you don't launch into paragraphs of defense. You give them calm certainty with few words, and then you return to your mission, your purpose, your joy. It means you understand that attraction isn't built in conversations of persuasion. It's built in the magnetic energy of independence. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim time, you reclaim energy, you reclaim your emotional leverage. And here's what happens: the avoidant starts watching. They notice you're no longer pulling at their sleeve, no longer handing them long explanations of who you are, no longer begging them to see your worth. Instead, you are demonstrating your worth with every step you take toward your best self. That's the moment the avoidant begins to question their own distance. That's when curiosity replaces fear. That's when silence becomes louder than words. Because power isn't in explanation, it's in demonstration. And once you live it, they can't unsee it. One of the greatest traps people fall into with avoidance is the endless cycle of pursuit. The avoidant pulls away, and instantly, the anxious part of you wants to chase. You text, you call, you ask questions, you send reassurance, you demand answers. You think if you just reach out one more time, they'll give you the clarity, the affection, the stability you crave. But here's the brutal truth: every time you pursue, you reinforce the very fear that makes them withdraw. To an avoidant, pursuit feels like pressure, and pressure is the enemy of attachment. The harder you chase, the faster they disappear. This is why breaking the pattern is essential. You can't heal or transform this dynamic by playing into it. You must disrupt it. You must become the unexpected force they didn't see coming. Instead of leaning in when they pull away, you lean back. Instead of pushing for closeness, you create space. Instead of proving your value, you let the absence of your energy do the work for you. At first, this feels counterintuitive. Everything inside of you screams to reach out, to fix it, to pull them back before they're gone. But the shift happens when you recognize that pursuit is the oxygen to their distance. Cut off the oxygen, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. When you stop pursuing, you stop feeding the cycle, and the avoidant who is so used to being chased now feels something new: your absence. Your absence is powerful. It creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, curiosity is born. They start asking themselves questions: where did you go? Why aren't you reacting the way you used to? Why does it feel different without your constant presence? That curiosity breaks their own pattern, because instead of running from pressure, they're pulled by intrigue. Breaking the pursuit doesn't mean you play games or act manipulative. It means you respect yourself enough to stop chasing someone who isn't leaning in. It means you value your energy too much to waste it convincing someone of your worth. It means you realize that the greatest pursuit isn't of them, it's of your own growth, your own freedom, your own purpose. And here's the deeper layer. When you break the pursuit, you prove to yourself that you don't need them to validate your existence. You no longer beg for breadcrumbs of attention. You no longer collapse at the sight of distance. You stand in your own center, and from that center, you radiate strength, calmness, and certainty, qualities that are magnetic even to someone who fears closeness. The moment you stop chasing, the dynamic changes forever, because now, instead of running from you, the avoidant is forced to face the reality of what life feels like without your pursuit, and that reality is often the very thing that wakes them up. Most people misunderstand space when it comes to avoidance. They see space as rejection. They see distance as abandonment. So when the avoidant steps back, panic rises, and the instinct is to close the gap immediately. But here's the paradox. The more you fight their need for space, the more suffocated they feel. And suffocation to an avoidant is the fastest trigger to shut down completely. The key is not just to give them space, it's to give space with strength. Giving space doesn't mean you shrink back in silence while secretly drowning in fear. It doesn't mean you wait by your phone, obsessing over when they'll return. That's not strength, that's passive desperation disguised as patience. True strength in space means you occupy yourself so fully with your own growth, your own joy, your own mission, that their absence doesn't paralyze you. It means when they step back, you don't collapse, you expand. Imagine the difference. One person gives space while trembling, checking their phone every 5 minutes, replaying every conversation in their mind, waiting for that little notification to prove they're not forgotten. The other gives space with a calm assurance, using that time to hit the gym harder, chase goals, pour energy into passions, strengthen friendships, and build an identity so magnetic that when the avoidant looks back, they see someone rising, not someone waiting. The first energy repels, the second energy attracts. Strength in space is about showing that you're not afraid of distance. You don't interpret their need for breathing room as proof that you're unlovable. Instead, you interpret it as their process. And while they process, you live. This doesn't just shift their perception of you, it shifts your perception of yourself. You realize you are not at the mercy of someone else's closeness. You realize your life doesn't pause when they need time. You realize your worth doesn't decrease because they took a step back. And here's where the real magic happens. When you give space with strength, you actually create safety. The avoidant starts to feel that being close to you doesn't mean losing themselves. They sense that intimacy with you doesn't strip away freedom. That realization slowly rewires their fear, because for the first time, closeness doesn't equal suffocation. The strength you show in distance becomes the very bridge to closeness. Because when you don't crumble in the silence, you prove that you're not a threat to their autonomy, you're an ally to it, and paradoxically, that is what draws them back in. Giving space with strength is not weakness. It's leverage. It's not retreat. It's magnetism. It's not about losing them. It's about finding yourself so powerfully that they can't help but feel the pull back to you. At the center of every attachment dynamic lies one truth: you cannot hold anyone if you've lost the grip on yourself. When dealing with an avoidant, this truth becomes even sharper because they are drawn not to dependency, not to need, but to strength. And strength is born when you rebuild your core identity. Too many people enter relationships by slowly losing pieces of who they are. They trade their passions for approval. They shrink their dreams to fit someone else's comfort zone. They mold themselves to avoid conflict, thinking this sacrifice will earn love. But the cost is devastating. The more you abandon yourself, the more the avoidant feels the weight of responsibility. and that weight suffocates them until they retreat. Rebuilding your core identity means reclaiming everything you lost while chasing love. It means remembering who you were before fear, before compromise, before you bent yourself into the shape you thought they would accept. What did you once love? What lit you up before their silence consumed your thoughts? What goals did you set aside while waiting for their affection? That's where the work begins. Because the avoidant isn't drawn to explanations, they're drawn to energy. And nothing radiates stronger energy than a person aligned with their own mission. Think about it. When you're pursuing your health, building your body, pouring energy into your career, creating art, traveling, growing skills, or simply living with joy, you glow differently. You no longer approach the avoidant with empty hands begging for validation. You approach them as someone full, someone expanding, someone magnetic. That presence changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, they're not running from a void, they're witnessing a force, and a force is hard to ignore. Rebuilding your identity also means setting boundaries that protect it. When you know who you are, you stop bending just to keep someone close. You stop saying yes when your heart screams no. You stop tolerating behaviors that chip away at your dignity. This strength doesn't push the avoidant away, it earns respect. Because deep down, even the most distant person is drawn to someone who refuses to abandon themselves. But this isn't just about pulling them in. It's about pulling yourself back to life. It's about breaking the illusion that your worth depends on their closeness. It's about proving to yourself that you were never lacking, you were only misplaced. And when you rise back into your identity, everything shifts. You feel stronger, you feel freer, you feel whole again. And in that wholeness, the avoidant sees something different, someone who doesn't need them, but chooses them. And choice, not desperation, is what creates real attraction. When you're in a dynamic with an avoidant, the greatest test is how you handle their distance, their silence, or their sudden coldness. Most people fail this test because they confuse reaction with response. Reaction is emotional impulse. It's the text you fire off in anger, the long message begging for clarity, the argument that explodes because your fear got louder than your wisdom. Reaction feels powerful in the moment, but in reality, it drains your authority, it hands them control, and it proves the very thing they fear, that closeness with you equals chaos, pressure, and instability. Responding, on the other hand, is mastery. Response is calm. Response is deliberate. Response is rooted not in fear, but in strength. When you respond instead of react, you hold your power. You show that you are steady, centered, and unshaken even in the face of their distance. That steadiness is magnetic because the avoidant is wired to distrust intensity. They've built their survival on escaping it. But when you meet their withdrawal not with panic but with composure, you disarm the fear they've carried for years. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, they pull away, and you immediately lash out, "Why are you ignoring me? Do you even care about me? Tell me what I did wrong." Their walls shoot up, their defenses tighten, and they retreat even further. In the second, they pull away, and you breathe, you pause, you ground yourself before you act. Instead of a frantic paragraph, you send a short, steady message, or sometimes no message at all, because you know your worth isn't on trial. That difference changes everything. The first makes you forgettable. The second makes you unforgettable. Responding isn't about ignoring your emotions. It's about leading them. It's about training yourself to pause in the heat of the moment, to ask, am I acting from fear or am I acting from strength? That single question shifts your energy instantly. When you act from strength, your timing changes. Your words carry a different weight. And most importantly, you prove to yourself that you are no longer controlled by someone else's behavior. You are in command of your own. Avoidants secretly crave this kind of stability. They fear closeness because they expect it to mean drama, emotional storms, and suffocation. But when you respond with grounded calmness, you break that pattern. You show them that intimacy can feel safe, steady, and free of chaos. That realization is what opens the door to deeper connection. Every reaction is a loss of power. Every response is a gain of influence. And when you master the art of responding, you not only change how they experience you, you change how you experience yourself. You become untouchable, steady, and magnetic. One of the greatest mistakes people make with avoidance is trying to drag them into closeness at a speed they are not ready for. You feel the spark, you feel the connection, and you want to accelerate, but they start to pull back because the pace feels unsafe. And the more you try to speed things up, the more they slam the brakes. It becomes a tug of war, your urgency against their resistance. The harder you pull, the more they resist, and the more you both end up exhausted. But there's another way, a more powerful way, mirroring their pace without mirroring their fear. Mirroring their pace doesn't mean you shrink into avoidance yourself. It doesn't mean you match their fear by closing off your heart. It means you align with their rhythm while standing tall in your own strength. If they need to move slow, you slow down, but not in weakness, in confidence. You let them see that you can match their steps without losing your balance. You're not chasing them, you're not dragging them, you're simply walking alongside at the speed that feels natural to them. This creates safety, it creates trust, it communicates that you're not here to overwhelm, but to meet them where they are. When you mirror their pace, you stop making the relationship about force and you start making it about flow. And flow is magnetic. Suddenly, the avoidant doesn't feel hunted, they feel honored. They don't feel trapped, they feel seen. That recognition disarms their defenses because it proves you understand one of their deepest fears, losing control. But here's the crucial part, you mirror their pace without absorbing their fear. If they step back slightly, you don't collapse into panic. If they hesitate, you don't interpret it as rejection. You stay steady, open, and grounded. This is the line most people miss. They think slowing down means matching the avoidant's fear, when in reality, it means holding your center while respecting their rhythm. That balance makes you magnetic. Think of it like dancing. If your partner is moving carefully, you don't stump ahead and throw them off. You sync with their steps. But you also don't freeze when they hesitate. You hold the rhythm, you keep the music alive, and in doing so, you give them confidence to move with you. That's the art of mirroring pace, not fear. Avoidance tests closeness not by words, but by energy. When they sense you can honor their timing without breaking down, they feel safe enough to lean in further. And every time they lean, you show them that closeness doesn't mean drowning. That trust is built not by rushing, but by rhythm. And once rhythm is established, fear begins to dissolve. Boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They are the lines that define your worth, your self-respect, and your standards. When you're dealing with an avoidant, boundaries are the ultimate test of whether you value yourself more than you fear losing them. Too many people sacrifice boundaries just to keep the connection alive. They let the avoidant call all the shots, decide when to engage, when to disappear, and when to return. And each time they bend further, they believe they're preserving love. But what they're really doing is teaching the avoidant that they can withdraw without consequence, return without effort, and take without ever having to give. That's not love, that's self-abandonment disguised as patience. Standing unshakable in boundaries means you no longer compromise on your core values. If communication matters to you, you don't tolerate being ghosted for weeks without addressing it. If respect matters, you don't excuse coldness or cruelty as just their style. If emotional consistency is important, you don't convince yourself that crumbs are enough just because you fear they'll leave if you ask for more. This firmness doesn't repel them, it actually creates attraction. Because deep down, even the most avoidant person respects strength. They may resist it at first, but they cannot ignore it. Boundaries send the message that you are not willing to lose yourself just to keep them. And paradoxically, that's what makes them feel safe with you. Boundaries are magnetic because they communicate certainty. Certainty that you know what you want. Certainty that you're not afraid to walk away if it's not met. Certainty that you won't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. And certainty is rare, it commands respect. The avoidant doesn't need another person who enables their patterns. They need someone who disrupts them, not through chaos, but through clarity. And clarity is what boundaries provide. The moment you stand firm, you reclaim your leverage. You're no longer begging for closeness. You're inviting it, but only under conditions that honor both people. And if they can't meet that, you don't crumble. You don't chase. You don't explain. You choose yourself. That strength shakes them because avoidants expect others to collapse at their distance. But when you don't collapse, when you stand steady, you become the one thing they didn't expect, someone they can't control, someone they can't easily dismiss, someone who forces them to rise higher if they want to stand beside you. Unshakable boundaries are not about controlling them. They're about controlling yourself. They're not about building walls. They're about building standards. And when you hold those standards, you don't just shift the dynamic with the avoidant. You elevate the entire way you experience love. The truth is, flipping an avoidance attachment isn't about tricks, manipulation, or games. It's not about outsmarting them, convincing them, or bending yourself until you're unrecognizable. It's about standing in the fullest, strongest, most radiant version of yourself. Because at the end of the day, love doesn't belong to the desperate. It belongs to the powerful. And power doesn't come from chasing, begging, or proving. Power comes from alignment, from clarity, from living in a way that demands respect without ever having to ask for it. Each of the 7 moves is not just about shifting their behavior. It's about shifting yours. When you stop explaining and start living, you step out of the exhausting cycle of proving and into the magnetic force of demonstration. When you break the pattern of pursuit, you stop giving energy to the chase and start giving energy to your own life. When you give space with strength, you stop collapsing under silence and instead expand into presence. These moves are not just techniques, they're transformations. And as you rebuild your core identity, you remember that you were never meant to beg for love. You were meant to embody it. You were meant to carry yourself in such a way that connection with you feels like a privilege, not a burden. You were meant to live with purpose so powerful that anyone who enters your orbit feels lifted, not drained. That's the kind of energy an avoidant or anyone else cannot ignore. It's not about chasing them. It's about becoming someone they naturally move toward. When you respond instead of react, you claim mastery over your emotions. You stop handing them the steering wheel to your worth. You prove that no matter what they do, you remain steady, centered, unbroken. And when you mirror their pace without mirroring their fear, you create a rhythm that disarms their defenses and slowly dissolves their walls. You stop overwhelming them with pressure and instead invite them with trust. That's the shift that makes them question the patterns they've lived by for years. And then you stand unshakable in your boundaries. You refuse to abandon yourself for the illusion of closeness. You set standards that elevate, not suffocate. You show them that intimacy with you is not about control, but about respect. You teach them through your certainty that love can be safe, powerful, and free. Boundaries are the anchor that keep you steady while their storms come and go. And when they see you stand tall in that strength, they begin to realize that losing you would mean losing something rare, something irreplaceable. So yes, 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. This is more than a formula. It's a rebirth. It's a reclaiming of your identity, your power, and your worth. And once you step into it, the avoidant doesn't just see you differently, you see yourself differently. You no longer chase validation because you've become the validation. You no longer fear their silence because your presence is louder, and you no longer wait for love to arrive because you are living as love itself. That is how you flip an avoidance attachment, by flipping the script on yourself first. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. If this message spoke to you, if it lit a spark in your heart, then take these words and put them into action. Because transformation doesn't happen by listening, it happens by living. Remember, you are stronger than your fears, greater than your doubts, and worthy of love that meets you with respect and depth. If you found value here, don't forget to hit that like button, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you never miss the next breakthrough message. Every comment, every share, every bit of engagement helps this community grow, and together we are creating a movement of strength, healing, and unstoppable self-worth. Your journey doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. Keep rising, keep choosing yourself, and keep walking the path that leads you to the life and love you truly deserve. Until next time, thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and remember this: you are the power, you are the light, and your story is far from over. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.